Hey chestnuts, welcome to SG Meme. And today we'll be looking at a game by Alekhine and Grünfeld. Some people say this is the birth of the Grünfeld. Well, at least it's the birth of the Grünfeld in, top competition. I mean, he played it before in like the same year, April 1922 against Samish, who, has like variations named after him in what was that? What was that opening? King's Indian, right? And it's like only the second time the Grunfeld has been played in top competition. And he's the inventor, but he actually didn't play the opening that much. But there's a funny story about this game, but we'll talk about that after the game ends. Alrighty. So how does it start? Alright, like the normal Grunfeld, it starts d4, right? Okay, and then knight to f6, d4, g6, alright. Knight to c3. Okay, pretty standard stuff, right? Pretty standard. So, and then d5 is when the Grunfeld is reached. All right. Then Alekhine chose bishop g5, which is definitely a sharp variation. And another way that it could go actually is if black plays bishop to g7, which was played in So versus Grischuk. All right. Could go on like knight f3. All right, knight to e4. Knight 2, bishop to f4. Okay, you don't want to trade the bishop so quickly. Knight takes, and pawn takes, and he takes c4, e3, and then the queen can be centralized right here where you can't really push because the queen will capture this pawn. All right, bishop to e2, bishop to f5. Alrighty, but that's not really what happened in this game. So after knight to e4, Alekhine chose d takes d5. Oh no! And then Grunfeld chose knight takes c3, b takes c3, queen takes d5. Then we have knight to f3. All right, so it looks fairly normal. It looks fairly normal, but um, I can imagine since this is the first time that Alekhine or uh had been presented with this opening, he was probably a little bit shaken up, right? All right, bishop to g7, e3, c5 to contest the center. Then we have bishop to b5 check. Right. And Grunfeld chose bishop to d7. You can also play knight to c6, castle, and then you can capture here, right? And perhaps white can attack the queen like this, and the queen goes back to d6. All right. So maybe if he was more prepared, which Alekhine usually was pretty prepared in the opening, but in this game he was treading on new ground. All right. So what did happen is bishop to b5 check, bishop to d7, e4, queen goes to e4. That's one powerful queen. Look at that. It radiates. And it's very tough to kick away. All right, white castles. Then bishop takes, pawn takes, knight to d7, rook to c1. Alrighty. So this position looks pretty playable for both sides still. Like no one really has a huge advantage yet. Okay, so what Grunfeld chose was to reinforce the c pawn with b6, and Alekhine continued with queen to b3, then h6, bishop to h4, castles, rook to c4. Putting this rook, aiming it straight at that queen. And then Grünfeld chose queen to e6, where if the rook is moved, oh no, queen trade. Where he looks like he might have a pretty good endgame, right? At least this bishop seems pretty stuck here, whereas this bishop is ready to aim at this diagonal. And although it could go here and it's reposition itself, which is not where it's not too bad. But the knight, so seems like fairly even chances the endgame. All right, rook to d1, rook f to e8, e5, then queen goes to d6, bishop g3 attacking the queen. Whoops. Then e5. All right, you could go queen to f6, right? And then but white can just reposition himself with queen with rook to c2, and then queen goes to f5. And then black looks pretty good here. Okay, now this bishop controls all the dark squares, and now this queen pretty good because it controls this diagonal where all the light squares are. All right. So e5, and then pawn takes. Could also play actually. Could also play rook to a4 instead of taking that pawn. All right. Then c4, and then rook takes here, and then so you could sacrifice a pawn in order to gain an outpost here for your knight, which looks pretty good. So that's a possibility. That's a possibility. Knight to c5, then queen to c2. Then we have a6 to contest this pawn and perhaps target that isolated pawn over there. All right, but that's not what happened. This isn't fantasy land. Okay, let's continue with the real game. Queen takes e6. Rook to d6. Whoa, and it looks like Alekhine has a pretty decent position, right? I mean, he doesn't look that much bad, that much worse here. Look at this. This rook, pretty far in there. Okay. So, all in all, he's going after this theoretical novelty pretty well. All right, queen goes to e7, rook to a4. You know, because there's this pawn chain here, and this is the end of the pawn chain, so targeting that. All right, knight to f8 to reposition this knight. Queen to d5, then rook a to d8. Knight goes back to d2. Rook takes d6. Bishop takes. Rook to d8. And then knight to c4. All right. Actually, it would have been a little better if white chose to capture this queen. Gobble, 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 gobble. And then rook takes d5. Knight goes to f1. The knight goes back to e6. All right, so this looks like a very playable game, right? I mean, black looks like he has better coordinated pieces, but this is still playable for white, right? But let's see what happens after Alekhine's rare tactical mistake, actually, because, you know, he was known as a tactical player, and he didn't really make tactical mistakes so much. So knight goes to c4, queen goes to d7, h3, knight to e6, queen to e4, bishop to f8. Uh-oh. So this thing is barreling down. So what happens actually? Bishop to f8. So what happens if you just move this bishop away from this earlier, right? If you just move this bishop away, this queen gets traded. Okay, this queen gets taken. So that's not gonna happen. Bishop to f8. If bishop doesn't take, if bishop just goes to straight to g3. Oh, this yummy check. And look at that fork. Oh no. All right, so king would move and then All right, but bishop took in the actual game. Bishop took to f8, queen d1 check, goes to h2, then queen takes this. So a little bit of an advantage for. So he's up the exchange basically, right? e7, rook to e8, bishop to f6, knight to g7. Now aiming at the queen, and the queen cannot capture because, oh no, that knight. All right, so queen goes back to d3. And you might see that both these pawns are hanging. Like, why? Why would you do that, Alekhine? Why? Well, if you go back to d1 trying to defend both, you risk see this knight. So, all right. So Alekhine chose to go queen d3. Now queen takes a2 and yummy pawns. Now the queen side starts to really fall apart here. All right, let's see what else happened. So bishop goes back to b2, repositioning, rook to e6, queen to c3, with this cheap check, just in case Grünfeld just goes, oh, oopsie daisies, it would be mate. So obviously you have to defend that with f6, queen to d3, h5, gaining more space in the king side, right? e4, queen to a4, then knight to d6, which looks a little over ambitious to me, at least when I first look at it. It seems like white should just try to be a little defensive and just play for the draw, right? With knight to d2. But honestly, the position looks pretty lost. Look at this. The rook has some pretty good play, right? Oh, whoops. And these pawns look pretty structured, and eventually these are just gonna move forward like that, right? Looks pretty easy to do that. Okay, queen to b4 after this knight to c4 move, queen to b4. And now we have knight back to c4 because realize that ridiculous. Queen takes b5. No, my pawns. Okay, f4. Okay, try to gain this center, right? Target all those squares. Queen to c6, e5, f5 to try to solidify the center. Knight to d6. Oh, actually, that's a pretty strong knight. And so at least Alekhine has tried his best to make a draw here. I mean, these pawns look like they're gonna win the game anytime soon, and maybe it's probably a resignable position, but he just chose to see if Grünfeld would make a mistake. All right, rook to e7. Queen goes to g3. And then we have king to h7 because this pawn is now hanging. Then we have queen to g5, and now it's looking pretty scary for black if he's not careful. Alekhine has a lot of tactics up his sleeve, or as GMs like to call tricks. Okay, queen goes to d7, then queen goes back to g3. Knight to 6. And maybe for me, I would play knight to e8, right? To try to kick this knight away. So seems like the more natural move. And after knight, it still wins. Knight to c4, b5. To kick this knight away. And then, after that, the black can just gain a lot of space. Maybe you could have some counterplay with this, right? To gain what's it called? An outpost for your knight. Say queen takes, and then knight goes here, and then that knight is looking pretty good. You've repositioned yourself, but you've given up a pawn in the process. So All right, so I feel like that would have been a decent move, but Grünfeld goes knight to e6. Alekhine goes queen to f3, and then b5, and then now we have queen a8 trying to infiltrate. Right, if you take this pawn, then someone else will infiltrate. So at least Alekhine has some tactics. So he's kind of hoping for that. Alright, queen to d8. And now if this queen captures, it'll just be a knight trade. And Black's endgame is just ridiculous. If you lose the queen at this point, you're just going to lose the game. Okay. So queen to d8. Then queen goes back to d5. Then we have b4, d3, a5. Queen to c6. Alekhine's still trying. Queen to d7. Queen to a6. Bishop to a1. Oh, a4 first. Now it's defended and the queen can't capture. So Alekhine tries. Bishop to a1. a3. Look at that. Just straight up. Pawns rolling wrong. Alright, queen to c4. Kind of blockade these pawns. Stop them from moving. Queen to c6. King to g1. Queen goes to f3 to infiltrate. Oh, you've left your king open, Alekhine. What are you gonna do now? He's like, no, Grünfeld, show mercy, please. No, he didn't really say that. Okay, king to h2 to defend. And then queen to f2 check. And actually, here, so before back then when they used to seal moves, right? And then take an adjournment. So this is a funny story. I think I'll just read the story to you. Just read. Here is the story written by Hans Mock and Fred Reinfeld. Alekhine hit on still another way of resigning during the Vienna tournament of 1922. So here, Alekhine was trying to not only pushed opening theory but resigning theory. Check this out. Grünfeld had played what was then his new defense. Alekhine had tried to refute it and had failed, as we just saw. Alright. The game was adjourned. Alekhine naturally realized that he was lost, but was still curious to know whether his opponent might have sealed a mistake. So when play was resumed after dinner, he appeared in the tournament room. Wearing his hat and overcoat, he went to his table, which happened to be located near the entrance. When he saw that Grünfeld had sealed the strongest move, Alekhine resigned by taking his king and throwing it across the room. Oh man, that's just ridiculous. Alright. So how could this game have played out? Let's see. Queen to f2 check. Okay. King to h1. Alright, now this pawn is free to pickings, which would probably win the game still, but the best move would be h4. And she could capture, but usually people do not want to capture their pawns. But it doesn't really matter because if you push this knight is going to capture this pawn right here. So let's just say you capture, then knight takes is the only. I will take this, and the only way to stop it, capture the knight. So you probably wouldn't take in this instance. You would probably play. You would probably play. Oh yeah. So if you try queen to c1, right? Then here it's the same idea. Get mated here. You can try to stop this mate, and it's actually a pretty cool ending right here. Pretty cool. So knight takes. right? And it looks like, perhaps white can still play for something weird, even though, pawns are just gonna keep barreling down. But if we continue, queen takes, f2, he takes. Oh no, such a sad king. The computer won't let me go on the squares because it's illegal. Alright, so king would go to h2, f1 the queen, and then king could possibly go to g3. This seems all forced no matter what. Doesn't matter. I mean, there's no moves for this bishop. You can get captured by any pawn. But there's gonna be a mate here, so here, and then knight to e2 check, king to h4, and then queen to f4, mate. Alrighty. So yeah, that's the Grünfeld. That's the second time it has been played. Alright, cool. So if you like this video, feel free to like the channel. You can hit it like a clock, a chess clock, and you can sub if you wish. It's up to you guys. Alrighty, and then see you next video.